Good morning, and welcome to our guest speaker convocation. You're in for a real treat this morning, as we are joined by three guests from a variety of backgrounds for a discussion around our program theme, A New Way to Lead. These public servants have come today to impart knowledge about the work that they do every day and how that work has evolved as they, like you, are challenged to find a new way to lead. I'm Senior Counselor Adam Ortega, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. The structure for today's events is simple. We'll begin with a brief introduction of our guests, followed by some questions to which we will ask each of them to respond. In addition, we want you to be able to ask questions that you believe are relevant. So as we begin, if questions arise, please submit them in the chat function in the Zoom call. I will now introduce our guest speakers, and we'll go ahead and get started. So please be respectful, remain attentive, and try to absorb what they have to say. Our first guest today is Dr. Jim Henderson, the president of the University of Louisiana System. Good morning, Dr. Henderson. We also have John Long, the federal coordinating officer at FEMA. And our third guest is Mayor of Ruston, Louisiana, Mayor Ronnie Walker.
Good morning.
We are having a slight technical issue, so just give us 1 second. Can you mute me? All right, we're back. Give me one moment.
Ronnie and John, if we have just one more year of pandemic, we'll get the technology straight. We'll be pro.
No,
That's right.
you. No, thank you.
I'll do without, huh?
Right.
Totally agree. Jim Tech's regional really went over great.
It was beautiful.
It was incredible.
I watched every minute of it. I wish I'd been up there, but I watched every minute of it. And the ballpark was gorgeous. Ruston was gorgeous. It was great coverage. Thank you for everything you did to support it, Mayor.
Oh, I'm telling you, Tech did most of that. It was awesome. Of course, we had a big tournament at the sports complex, and we had the Peach Festival the same weekend. So it was really a big weekend for Ruston and sales tax.
Congratulations on that.
All right. Thank you guys for stealing some time for me. All right. So as I've mentioned, this year's program theme is a new way to lead. And through the course of American history, we've experienced several major life-altering moments, some brief, some generational, that have shaped us as individuals and defined us as a nation. Amongst these are world wars, economic recessions and depressions, terrorist attacks, and most recently, a global pandemic. And although each event may seem singular, we know that this couldn't be further from the truth. The commonality, either at the onset or as a result of these events, is finding a new way to lead. Leaders emerged and approach our nation's challenges with innovation to lead the American people forward. No substantive circumstance that we encounter is ever advanced or overcome by rote application or proven method of concepts. Simply put, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And so we'll begin with our first question for all of our panelists. Aside from the pandemic, was there a circumstance in your career as a leader where you had to lead in a very different way than you expected or felt that you were prepared for?
Well, I'll take a shot at that.
Go first.
I'll take a shot at that if it's all right, Adam. I was first put in my first formal leadership role in the corporate world when I was 21 years old. And while at 21, you're confident that you know everything there is to know about leadership. I am confident to tell you that no 21-year-old knows everything there is to know. I'm confident to tell you that no 51-year-old knows everything there is to know about leadership. And so when you're put in those positions, you're going to make mistakes. And this is kind of a lesson I think you'll draw on the rest of your career. Mistakes are not fatal. They're rarely fatal, especially mistakes that are well-intentioned and come from a good purpose. And you can overcome those. I had to learn quickly that even in a leadership role, that leadership is not just doing the things yourself. It's creating an environment where those around you want to struggle to achieve your organizational goals. And that's a great theory to read in the textbook, but when you can learn it and manifest it in real-time setting, it's a great leadership lesson, formative experience.
I think from my standpoint, the biggest challenge or change I had to face was coming from the business world in the banking institution and moving into public service as mayor. Totally different animals. I mean, you think you're going to run it just like you did at the bank. No, you can't do it. As I tell people all the time, the hardest part of government is it works so slow. In business, you study something, you decide, you make a decision, you move forward. In government, you study it and you study it and you study it until it's 3 times as expensive, and then you decide to do it. I mean, I'm being a little facetious there, but that was, I think, the hardest thing for me to realize, and how to speed that process up. And there are ways to speed it up, and we've found those ways, but that was a real eye-opening and life-changing event as far as leadership for me.
From my perspective, to add on a little bit, my leadership journey, thanks to Boys State, started at the Coast Guard Academy. And I would tell you that no 63-year-old knows everything about leadership either. It's really a journey. It's a journey for me that started at the Coast Guard Academy, where in nautical terms, they told me on day one that I was lower than whale shit. And so you start by learning, what it's like to be a follower, to do menial things for the student body, like empty the trash cans, clean the restrooms, and things like that, to work up to be an officer. And over 30 years, it was a laboratory of leadership. And it evolved along the way. After I retired and came to FEMA, my job, people don't know what a federal coordinating officer is. When there is a disaster like the hurricanes that we had last year, and the president declares it a disaster at the governor's request, they send a federal coordinating officer to coordinate everything the federal government does to support the governor in the state, to respond to the event and to recover from it. And so what I learned in this role is it's very different, because most of the people that you have to lead to do that coordination don't work for you. You can't give them orders and tell them what to do. You have to do as Eisenhower once famously said, leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. So how do you get them to want to do that? How do you make them see that what it is you're trying to do is in everybody's best interest? And that's why it's a journey from a period of as a young man, like most of you, in high school, I was elected, head of this, president of that, captain of the sports team, and didn't really give a lot of thought to it. But it is a journey. It's a journey of evolution, and a journey of learning that never ends.
Wonderful. All great responses. Thank you. And I think you guys touched on a lot of the topics that we're looking to talk about today. Things like how to be effective as a leader in public service. And I think a lot of our citizens experienced that this week, especially in our virtual setting, not being able to be in person and connect with our citizens the way that they typically would. They had to find new ways to inspire their peers to participate and engage, and really want to work hard to create the best product in our academic sessions. So my next question for all of you is, what could you describe a specific moment or time in your career where your perspective of your role in leadership changed?
Well, I'll take a crack at it in terms of the first time I became a commanding officer of a Coast Guard air station. The guy that I was taken over from gave me some really good advice. He said, nobody wants to give the boss bad news. And that means a couple of things as I thought about it. One is it's not about me or any other leader. It's about the people that you're trying to lead and the people that you're trying to help. And thing number one that became apparent is you have to be happy when you come to work every day. It doesn't matter if your dog died and your daughter ran off with a rock musician. If I come to work and I'm unhappy, then everybody there is going to be unhappy. The next thing it means is they don't want to give me bad news. So I have to find sources of information. And as has been said, you never really have all the information that you want to have to make a decision. But as Mayor Walker said, you have to find ways to make decisions and move forward. And I see that particularly in disaster response. The next thing that I would point to in my life is as I got beyond that point and became the supervisor and leader of other senior leaders, because what I realized is those people are people and they are fallible. And there's an old adage that there are always 10% who don't get it. What I found mathematically demonstrated is that of all of these people who worked for me, a third of them made serious mistakes that jeopardized their career. And they were all leadership kinds of mistakes. They weren't, technical mistakes. And that was a real eye opener. And then the third thing, as I said, was coming to work for FEMA, where I have to gain the trust of the people that I am leading and working with. And that's always true, but it's different when you're trying to gain the trust of the governor, of his director of emergency management, of the mayor of Lake Charles, whose town has been wiped out by a hurricane. This is a completely different thing because none of those people work for me. They generally are nice to me because I have a really big checkbook. But that's, the people at Harvard call that meta leadership, leading leaders. And so, that I think will just give you a little bit different context.
I think that notion of trust is so important. And in higher education, there's this concept, this idea of what's called shared governance, right? So if you're president of a university, you're the occupant of the office of the presidency, and that comes with some formal accoutrements that speak to leadership. But you're really balancing the needs and wants and desires of a broad array of constituents, most of whom have conflicting ideas about what the institution should be and where the institution should go. It's one of the reasons why Admiral McCraven, after he retired from commanding U.S. Naval Special Forces and became the president of the University of Texas, he retired after 3 years and said being a university president is the most difficult job on the planet Earth. Now, he may have never been a mayor or have never run FEMA, but I can attest to what he's talking about, because this is a balance. And for me, when I was named the CEO of my first higher ed enterprise, I read everything there was to know about shared governance with faculty, how to bring faculty to the table, how to have these conversations with the faculty governance structure and bring them in. And we were in the midst of a massive budget reduction. So I brought the faculty senate president in and some of his faculty senate officers. And I set them down at a round table in my office, and I carefully walked them through every line of the budget and showed them some of the challenges we had, presented some solutions. And finally, after about an hour, I said, now listen, I really would love to know what you think. And they kind of looked at each other and said, well, why are you sharing this with us? No one's ever shown us the budget before. So I had come in with these preconceived notions of what the structure was going to be based on the theory. And the theory wasn't wrong. But what it was for me was this watershed moment where I realized that all the theoretical underpinnings are important, but the two most important things that you can bring to the table as a leader are authenticity. Be who you are. Don't try to be something that you're not. Don't be intoxicated by the trappings of the office. Be you and ensure that others see that that's you. And the other is empathy, the ability to look at issues through the eyes of those that you're trying to lead, to deeply understand why they may respond to a certain stimulus or a certain catalyst in a way that maybe you would respond in a different way. It allows you to anticipate some challenges and address them ahead of time. And when you have those two things, when you bring authenticity and empathy to the table, that's crucial to creating that environment of trust that John Long was talking about.
I want to follow up with what John said. And John, let me give FEMA some kudos. Y'all handled our disaster, our tornado in a great way. I mean, I couldn't be happy with the way y'all responded and how quickly the money was sent from DC to Baton Rouge. Now, we still haven't gotten it from Baton Rouge to us, but it won because of FEMA. It's been sitting in Baton Rouge for a while. I'd like for you to teach Baton Rouge how to move that a little faster. But, you know, when the tornado hit at 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm a hands-on kind of guy. When I first took office, I would go out. It didn't matter if it was midnight or 2 o'clock when we had a major water break or something, just to see what our guys were doing and know what the problems are and try to help provide better equipment or whatever. Plus, I'd always take them some fried chicken or some Gatorade or something also. But, you know, when you're thrown into that disaster and all of a sudden you can't do that. You're at the operations center and I couldn't get out and go see the issues in town, not until at night. It totally changes the way you're dealing with something. Plus, you're dealing with all these outside forces like John was talking about. I mean, FEMA and the sheriff's office and the state police and all we had to bring in, because we have our own electrical system, 200 people from, you know, all over the country to help us get our electrical grid back up in 7 days. So it makes you really look at things a different way. You get out of your comfort zone and you really have to start looking at the total picture and where everybody fits into it. So in times of disaster, that really is when you are problems like that, when you really realize the other pieces of leadership that you haven't been using.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you for the coordination of your responses and the layering and the complexity of how everything that each of you do in your individual positions is integrated into improving the lives of everyone involved. I'm curious, is there one experience that led any of you to public service, or is it something that you discovered once you began careers and found an opportunity or a larger purpose?
I'll take that one first. Mine was, I was in banking. I had apartments and a couple of businesses in town. And we were of course, we're in what we consider a 2-college town. Louisiana Tech's located here, but Gramblin's only 3 miles away. Louisiana Tech was trying to grow to 15,000, and our city decided, or the mayor and the city council decided, that they didn't want any more student housing. And that doesn't work when the university has capped their apartments or dorm room spaces. And the university was looking for investors that would, you know, fill that gap. And then you have the city saying, no, we don't want any more student housing. That's really what drove me, because I was sitting around after playing golf with my buddies and I was griping about it. And finally one of them said, Ronnie, you ought to just run for mayor. And I thought, yeah, right. He said, no, I mean, the university will never grow if there's not private sector that's helping it grow. So that's what caused me to go home and go, you know what, I think I want to do this. And I think Jim can tell you, I think we have the best partnership, the university and the city of Ruston, of anywhere I've ever been. And it's because Dr. Geis and I both see that it has to be a partnership. It can't be the university and the city. We've got to cooperate. We've got to work together. And that university is the economic driver of our city. So why wouldn't we want to do that?
And I want to echo that. There is, you know, each of our universities is a critical part of the community that it serves. And there's great relationships, certainly that are there, but there's none that's more robust, that is more forward-looking, and in my opinion, more innovative than the relationship that exists between Louisiana Tech and the city of Ruston, and the mayor, and of course President Geis and President Renault before him. Yep. Deserve a lot of credit for that, and that's essential for us as an educational enterprise, is because we are totally focused on serving the needs of our constituent groups and students and the communities that we serve. But for me, the moment I was a family of educators. My parents were educators. My brothers are both educators. I was the one that was in the private sector and used to laugh at them and say, you guys could never make it in the real world. But as I was making it in the real world, I saw some disparities. I saw people that worked for me that brought all of the intangibles to the table. They were natural leaders. They were They were naturally intelligent. They brought common sense to the table, and yet they were capped at where they were in the organization. They couldn't move up. And it was the common factor, the common detriment to these folks was access to formal education, formal training, the ability to really take that unrefined resource, if you will, and develop it to its full potential. And that's what got me interested in education and training. And what drew me was I saw a lot of systems in place that were trying to do things, but they were all discrete and completely isolated from each other. And there was no systemic approach to trying to elevate the populace, to make the individuals more competitive, and by extension, make our employers more competitive and make our economy grow. And so that was really what drew me to this work. And I've been blessed to be in some leadership positions at multiple layers in higher education. And now I have a system of 9 major universities that serve 92,000 students. So these ideas that I have, they better work, or we're all in for a long and dry future. But I feel good working with people like Les Geis and Chris Maggio and Ron Berry, and of course, Rick Gallo right there at Grambling. And I can name these leaders from across the state. And the way that we work, one, to advance their institutions, to make them the best possible individual institutions they can be, but at the same time, to leverage that individual excellence towards some collective outcomes, that's going to be the game changer for Louisiana.
Well, I guess public service started for me. I got a little taste of it as a Boy Scout, but it was really happenstance that when I went to Boy State, there were cadets from each of the service academies there. And I guess at the time, I didn't even know there was a Coast Guard Academy. But I applied and went, and the ethos of the Coast Guard as a humanitarian organization really struck with me. And that's, I guess, why I ended up staying for 30 years. I went to flight school. I thought flying would be fun. It was, but the first time I actually saved somebody's life, that stuck with me, and that's why I stuck with it for all those years. And then, so when I retired from that, going to FEMA was sort of a natural fit. The skills transferred, but more than that, it's very difficult but very rewarding when you can help people on the worst day of their lives. So if your house was destroyed, you need a lot of help. I tell people only half jokingly that I'm like the Undertaker. Nobody wants me around until they really need me, and then I can't make them happy. I can do a lot of things to help them to get started on recovering and trying to put their lives together. But no government at any level can put somebody's life back together in a week or 30 days or a year. Very often it's a very long and painful process. And so as much as you will, I will be the target of a certain amount of anger. I look at myself in the mirror every day and I say, I helped somebody. And that's one of the things that I think keeps people working in FEMA and working in public service.
Beautiful. Yes, great. Thank you. Often we have leaders in public service, and we fall into the trap of making assumptions about who they are and where they stand, often based on their shortcomings or challenges that they face, that the circumstances are just so out of their control that what they can actually achieve, the amount of their goal that they can actually achieve, does not meet the the way that they advertise those goals and the way that they hope to affect change in their role in public service. And so based on all of your careers and your titles, we can make assumptions about how you feel about Louisiana and its future. But I want to ask each of you directly, which aspect of Louisiana's future are you most optimistic for? What are you most looking forward to as we grow and develop as a state?
That one's really easy for me, so I'll jump at it first. And I'm going to go back to the tornado that hit our city a little over 2 years ago. As I said, I was in the operations center. The tornado hit at 2:15 in the morning. And I was in the operations center all day long. And I wasn't able, the only time I got out was to fly with the governor over it and see it from the air. Finally, about 7 that night, I was able to get out and go to some of the hardest hit areas, which were around the university. And I went down a street where every house was damaged. There was trees down in every yard. And then I get to one house and the yard is perfectly clean. The trees that had been blown over were already cut up, moved off to the road. And it was a lady that was probably older than I am, and I'm 70, so she was probably 72 or 75, sitting on her porch. And I walked up to her and I said, "Wow, your yard is great. How in the world did you get this cleaned up so quickly?" And she said, "Oh, I had 30 kids from Louisiana Tech come help." And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Tech's out because classes are shut down. They can't drive in here, so they had to walk. I said, "Well, how did they know to come to your house?" And she said, "My neighbor was helping cut some trees up in my yard, and the students said they were following the sounds of the chainsaws." I've told that story 100 times probably, because these kids could have been doing anything else, but instead they were banding together 10 or 20 or 30 at a time, and they were following the sounds of the chainsaw because they knew somebody would be cutting up a tree and needed some help moving some limbs. So they were about 4 blocks away from the university, and they walked, and they did that literally for a week. The Saturday after the tornado hit on Thursday, the university had what they call the big event every year, where they go out in the community and they help people clean up their yards or do work or whatever. 1,500 students showed up that day. They started with the university because there was lots of cleanup to do on the university, but then they spread out into the rest of the city. That's when I said to myself, Louisiana is in good shape. The United States is in good shape. These kids were putting people they didn't know, getting out, working, and that spoke volumes to me about the kind of kids, and they're not kids, young adults, who come to Louisiana Tech and other universities. The afternoon, I was back out doing the same thing. And there was a group of students, there were Tech students, Grambling, ULM, and some from LSU. So that really changed. I always thought kids were great, but that really changed my attitude about the future of our state because of the way those kids responded to that disaster.
And Mayor, I think that's really a statement about a characteristic that I see is very prevalent in the emerging generation that bodes well for us. And it's a sense of social responsibility, right? Of the need to take collective action, help those around you. And this generation is so much more aware of the benefits of that type of thinking than my generation was, our generation was. It was, and that's what we want. We want each succeeding generation to not start at ground zero, but to learn from some of the lessons that we learned. So that's one of the things I think is exciting about Louisiana. But I want to shift gears and go to another aspect of our work that sometimes gets overlooked, and that's the component of research and our research infrastructure that we have in place. Of course, the Mayor Walker has one of the nation's leading research universities right there in his town. But you just go a little bit to the east to ULM, where they're finding ways to improve lives that sometimes you wouldn't understand, that you wouldn't even suspect. They have found the qualities of olive oil that can treat and prevent breast cancer and even dementia. You know, at Louisiana Tech, they have discovered and invented a new way, a non-destructive way to bring fiber from the road to the end user in a building that's now the national standard. They also were selected because of their data and analysis and research associated with that. They informed the Air Force Global Strike Command at 69 bases around the world how to predict the impact of the COVID-19 virus on those 69 posts. At McNeese, they found antibiotic qualities of alligator blood. At UL Lafayette, they did the preclinical trials for the Pfizer vaccine. Those trials were conducted at the New Iberia Research Center. And I could go across the state at each one of these institutions and show how we're not just teaching students and preparing them for life and career success. We're actually generating new knowledge and new understanding at an incredible rate. We're harnessing the technology and all of the promise that comes from exponentially advancing technology. Your imagination is not big enough to capture all that's going on at those institutions. And that's another important part of what we do that I think that you can get involved with and develop your own interest in and find your passion. My son has graduated from UL Lafayette this last December, had degrees in physics, math, and chemistry, but is now proficient in using an ion beam microscopy with a nation-leading particle accelerator. I'm a journalism major. I won't say anything else more about that, but that's class-leading research that's occurring right here in Louisiana at our institutions.
I think both Dr. Henderson and Mayor Walker have made excellent points. I would just add to that, you know, from my perspective, I do see, because I spend a lot of time these days, I have over the last year with the governor, and I see all of the things that are being done in Louisiana that are innovative to move the state forward. At the same time, I see the resilience of the people of Louisiana. I see it around my home in New Orleans, where my friends have recovered from having their homes destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. I see it today as I travel around Lake Charles, where in the last year they had COVID, then they had 2 hurricanes 3 weeks apart, and then a severe winter storm, and then in May floods. And these people have been hit over and over by disasters, and yet they have good attitudes and they're resilient, and they continue to work to come back and rebuild their lives. And so I just think I would tell you, from having worked in a lot of different areas around the country, that it's not that way everywhere. I feel Louisiana is a special place. I came back to it to spend the rest of my life here, and I love it. And that's really why. It's the people and our attitudes and our willingness to try new things, to move forward, and to never give up.
Nothing. Thank you. Louisianans are nothing if not resilient. I think all of us can agree on that. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to take some questions from our citizens. So our first question is from Mayor Walker, from our citizen named Justin. You mentioned the importance and the emphasis of celebrating the unique qualities of each of our universities in Louisiana. How does your major university in your city influence the choices that you make for the city?
All the time. I mean, every choice. I mean, if we're building a new road or whatever, this is a simple answer to part of it, but I want to expand on it later. I mean, every road we build or rebuild, we're putting bike trails in an 8-foot sidewalk combination bike trail, simply because of how many students live throughout our city who need a way to get to class, not just by driving a car. As Jim can tell you, you can't build enough parking lots at a university. But I think the thing that really comes to light is we received a $17.5 million bill grant. The first one in over 10 years in North Louisiana for a city. And it was a grant that was a joint grant between the university and the city. It's providing a new entrance to the university. It's rebuilding and building new roads to the university. But the main thing is when you leave our downtown and go to the middle of the campus, which is only about 6 blocks, you won't know the difference. I mean, everything will look the same. The sidewalk, the planters, everything we do, it will be a smart city component to that the university will use for testing, and the city will, and other companies can. We have outside companies that want to come and participate in that. So yes, the university is so important that Dr. Geis and I try to meet and have lunch once a month just to talk about the many things that are going on. They're building more housing. So when we look at groups that are wanting to build housing, we look at the traffic flow and everything else, because like I said earlier, the university is the economic driver for the city. So we must look at that. When we look right after the tornado hit, we realized we needed to put a hardened lead to the university as far as the electricity, because the city provides we have our own distribution system, and we provide some of the power for the university. We realized that needed to be buried so that if we have another tornado, it wouldn't happen. We got an EDA grant so we could bury that lead, but also put in a redundancy lead from one of our other substations. So yes, everything we do, we have to look at the university, because when you have 12, 13, 14,000 students coming to your city, you have to consider that in everything that you do.
Splendid. So our next question is from a citizen named Cade, and I'll direct this one to Dr. Henderson. As a leader of so many universities from across all different parts of the state, do you ever find yourself in a position where what you believe is best or is the correct response to an issue contradicts what your constituents believe is the correct response to that issue? And how do you handle that situation?
That happens multiple times per day. And it is, and that's the hard thing, right? But it's also the fun and exhilarating thing, because usually you can find solutions that advance the institution or advance the mission. And that's one of the things that you have to be clear. You have to do the work ahead of time, being very clear on what your purpose is. What is the ultimate outcome that we're trying to achieve? And I'm not talking about a narrow focus. I'm talking about in general. And then building up the social and political capital with constituents by continually demonstrating to them that you're going to do what's right, or even if it's the hard decision, you're going to make that decision and you're going to do the work necessary to bring them to the table, to have the conversations. That gives you a lot of room for error, if you will. You develop this level of trust. And that goes back to those qualities of authenticity and empathy. But for me, so I've got 9 universities that in many ways are competitors with each other. Certainly they're competitors on the sports field. And sometimes they're competitors for students. They're competitive for research dollars. And it is where I've seen leaders make mistakes is where in this role is they've tried to eliminate that competition. And I take the opposite approach. I think that competition is actually essential in the right ways and with the right tone to advance these institutions. And you allow them to do that, but they do that in a way that's not detrimental to any of the institutions. It advances their own. And in those areas where you can collaborate and you can work collectively to achieve some things, whether that's in our strategic framework that we developed that promises to create the most educated generation in Louisiana's history, or whether it's the 9 of us coming together to fight for TOPS, to ensure that TOPS promise is maintained for students, whether it's working collaboratively on a research project that draws on expertise at one institution and connects it with expertise in another, or finding ways to have complementary programs like the cyber undergraduate work that's being done at Grambling, the first HBCU in the nation to have a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity. Oh, by the way, they draw heavily on the nation's leading graduate work in cybersecurity that's being done at Louisiana Tech. So allowing that type of collaboration to come in without artificially negating the competition and without trying to make everybody happy all the time. But in the abstract or in the collective, we're constantly making progress towards those common goals. That's the balance that I have to strike every day. It can be exhausting, but when you hit it right, it's exhilarating and very fulfilling.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. A lot of our counselors, or most of our counselors, are students in Louisiana. And I think we'd agree that we each have our own pride in our university. And it's really beautiful when we get to come together here and share our experiences at those universities, and how our experiences differ, but also how they complement each other and how we've each found our own unique place within the universities that we attend.
Well, Adam, this is the official class ring for Northwestern State. And every one of these rings is sequentially numbered. This one is number 001. I wear it every day. I wear it with great pride, and I'm a proud demon. But my parents,
demons.
Fork them, buddy. But my parents are proud graduates of Louisiana Tech. Dad, 1948. My mom, 1959. My brother graduated from then NLU, which is now ULM. I have cousins that graduated from McNeese. I have cousins that graduated from LSU. And so every one of these universities is a part of my life and helped form me and help make me what I am. And I love it. I love to kid with Les Geis about the old rivalry between Northwestern State and Louisiana Tech. And we're able to do that because we found that common bond where we're both focused on exactly the right things. And I can say this about 9 of those presidents. But at the same time, we have that pride and ability to laugh at ourselves, make fun of ourselves, and make fun of each other. And it just makes it a very difficult work fun to do. So
Wonderful. Our last question from citizens is for Mr. Long. And a lot of citizens are curious. Some are asking about specific scenarios. Some are asking more general questions. So I want to ask you, what is your thought process, or what is your kind of personal plan of attack for effectively working through crisis scenarios?
I have some rules of field operations that have manifested themselves to me, and some I borrowed and pulled together. But essentially, what it is it's a process of figuring out what needs to be done, make decisions in a timely manner, and take action. And when I say in a timely manner, the decisions that you make and how you make the decisions are often driven by the amount of time you have to make them. So early on in a crisis, you just need to make decisions and take action. Whereas as things slow down and you get more into recovery, you have more time to be collaborative and make decisions that involve more members of your team. And the trick is to know when to do what. So the rules go something like this. The first rule is the first report's always wrong. The reason for that is the second rule is communication is always hard. But the third rule is, interestingly enough, you never have all the information that you want to make a decision. The fourth rule is that time waits for no man, woman, or child. And so rule 5 is that not making a decision is a decision, but anything that you do, if you make a decision and take action with alacrity, then it's probably going to be okay. So if you think through the logic of that, time is the thing that you can never get back in a crisis. And so the bottom line answer is you're better off doing something than doing nothing. And so figuring out what that is really the trick to it. Earlier, it was said, Mayor Walker said that, you have to speed things up and take action. And that's really what I'm saying in a much longer way, I think. But I think he hit the nail on the head.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate you connecting it back to Mayor Walker's response and elaborating on that for us. I think you're right. It applies to so many different aspects of public service, not just crisis response. And I think even some of our citizens have experienced that this week in some of the shorter timeframes that we've given them for other academics, that, at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. And you can spend the entire 2 hours debating, going back and forth. But ultimately, there's sacrifice of personal goals and communication and finding a sense of camaraderie and helping those that you serve to serve the greater good. We have one last question for you all, and we'll begin with Mayor Walker, if that's okay. What is the best way for young people to get involved in local government and make a difference on their local community level?
That's a real easy one for me. We had our Dog Days of Summer, which is orientation for new students Louisiana Tech has during the summer. And Wednesday night, as I spoke to them, I said, you bring so much energy to our city, and we love that. We love the energy of when we have interns work in our city. I love to watch them work and see what they're doing and everything else, because it's just a different level of energy with a 20-year-old and a 70-year-old. So I would say get involved by, asking to volunteer first, but also internships. I mean, we have some that are paid, some that are volunteer, but to have them in this setting, I think is a great way to get involved. And I know this is not the question, but I saw somebody put a question up about politician versus public servant. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm not a politician. I always say I'm gonna be a public servant, because public servants, in my opinion, do what's right, no matter if it costs votes or not. They do what's right for the citizens. A politician, to me, says what he or she thinks people want to hear. So I would encourage all of you to be public servants, not politicians.
Mayor Walker, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We're having some issues with getting your audio through. We didn't catch the last part of your response.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
He said he's just a typical politician.
No. Can you hear me, Adam?
I can hear you fine, Mayor. Adam, can you hear me?
I think Adam's having a hard time hearing us, but we can hear you. And I hope the constituents did. And you heard Mayor Walker, and he is absolutely exactly correct. He is a public servant, and the furthest thing from the stereotypical politician that you might imagine. So I want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Could you continue with your thoughts? I apologize for our technical difficulties.
I'm not sure what part you didn't get, so I will just finish. I saw something, someone had a question about being a politician or a public servant, and I'm saying that I always say that I want to be a public servant. My wife and I have a joke about it. She'll say a politician. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a public servant. Public servant does what is best for the constituents, his citizens or her citizens. A politician to me says what those people want to hear at that point, whatever group he's in. I always want to be a public servant. I hope that these young men will do the same thing. I'm probably the oldest one on the group. I went to Boise State in Mississippi in 1968. I was elected mayor at that time. When they asked me to speak about 5 years ago to Boise State here, they had no idea that I had been elected mayor then. I had no idea that would lead to where I am today, that many years later. So, guys, I hope everything goes great. Always look at public service and be a public servant, not a politician.
All right. Did you all get a chance to respond to that?
Well, I'll just say real quickly to add to that is that politics is a part of every profession that you're going to be involved with. Sometimes it's politics that are limited to an office. Sometimes it's beyond that. And so you have to master the art of politics and understand what it means. It's about building consensus around something of significant import. And sometimes that's not always pretty. And I've seen some questions that come up in the chat about divisiveness and about how we become so far apart. We've gone to extremes in our partisanship, but we have some systems in place that are designed to ensure that we continue to move forward. Those systems are under stress, but they're still the best systems that have ever been developed. And I encourage you to go back and understand the history, read the Federalist Papers, understand the history of our structures of governance, but also read the critical analysis of our structures of governance. There was a Supreme Court decision that was released earlier this week. It was about a high school student's free speech. She was a student that tried to make the varsity team and cheerlead as a cheerleader. She didn't get it. She goes with a friend to like a convenience store, and they make a Snapchat video that was it was pretty rough. The school punished her for that, and she sued because it was a violation of her First Amendment rights. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court. I encourage you to read that decision. It's one of the most accessible, digestible decisions ever. 8-1 in favor of the student, which I think is fantastic. Free speech is under attack at every aspect of governance and society from both sides, by the way, the right and the left. But I encourage you to read that and then read the footnotes and read the sources of the footnotes and understand how all of this has been an evolution to get to where we are today. And understand that even though there's some sources of frustration, it leads you to where we can be in the future. That matters, and it comes to these types of arguments, but it matters in our everyday life as well. We're all dealing with a political world that requires us to meet the needs of multiple constituents, to understand those needs, and to move forward with clarity and purpose, but at the same time bringing as many of those people along with us as we possibly can.
Wonderful. Thank you again for taking the time to be here and for sharing your insight and experience with our citizens. I think everyone in our ranks, everyone participating today, probably heard something that they'll be able to take with them as they move forward and they return home into their communities and their schools. We hope that you all join us again in the future. We're really grateful that you have taken the time to support Louisiana Boys State. And if your schedule allows, please stay on this call to join us for our general election convocation, where our final 8 candidates for state office will give their final speeches, and the citizens of Louisiana Boys State will elect their governor. Citizens, at this time, we would like you to transition. We would like you to turn off your cameras, where we will take a 15-minute recess. After our break, we will return to this room and begin our general election convocation sharply at 10:45 a.m. And we'll see you all then.
Thank y'all very much. Enjoy it.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.